Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episode, and this episode is very, very important, and it's all about biotechnology. And we have our world famous speaker, Professor David Schumacher, Mr. Aaron. We have our another famous speaker, very famous speaker. Recently, he done his work with Bezos, right? So if you want, you can share all of your meetings and everything with our young audience. They will be really happy. Professor Edward, we have our very good friends and supporter, Mr. James It, and very energetic professor, Professor Donalds. So thank you everyone for joining today. And this is very important, especially for Asian communities and developing nations, because biotechnology is booming. Every government now they are concentrating, and corporation are concentrating on biotechnology. There are many corporations actually moving here to theirs in Asia Pacific. Everybody like concentrate on biotechnology, but we want to know more from industry, from the academia part, and especially the different kind of innovations we love to know. So I want to start from Professor David Schumacher. How do you want to analyze this biotechnology? What are the interesting research and inside industry you want to share with our audience?
Yes, hello Sharif and hello everyone. Yeah, this is an absolutely great subject on so many different ways to look at it. But first off, let me give you a little definition of what I mean when I talk about biotechnology or biotech. So that's using living processes, organisms to manufacture technology. And here's the key part, especially from my transhuman background, which is the goal of this is to improve the quality of human life. That's what this is all about. Uh, in the news, COVID's been in the news now for nearly a year and a half, and the two of the vaccines were produced from a biotechnology standpoint. They were using mRNA technology, and we can go into a little bit of that for how it differs from traditional, but I won't do that in my introductory remarks. The point is that we were able to produce a very effective vaccine in a short period of time by using this thing called biotechnology. The biotechnology market, if you're looking at it from a financial standpoint, is one that is going to be probably one of the greatest growth areas over the next 10, 15, maybe even 20 years. It's hard to predict how long this can go because we're just seeing the beginning of it now. But there are many exciting technologies that we talk about on the show. If I was a youth in Malaysia or anywhere in the world and was open to different job opportunities, I would definitely be looking at the biotech sector. When I was a bit younger, it was computer digitalization that did that, and that carried me through a great career where I had many advantages over friends that were working in other areas trying to get ahead. I see those same type of advantages available to people that get involved in biotech now, whether you do it from a financial standpoint, looking at biotech stocks, looking at what the biotech stocks growth potential will be, and then always looking back to what will be the benefit to humankind from what they are bringing. Those two things are locked together. Very important. I was trying to get an idea on knowledgeable projections about what the biotech market would look like. And I came across an article from Grandview Research that said that the biotech market in 2020 was already over $700 billion. Now stop and think about that. That's 700 billion US dollars. And it's your career, whether you invest in that with your funds, those are two things to do. Now, I have not investing in it in my career, but I do own biotech stocks. I'm not a stockbroker. I'm not a knowledgeable in that area, but I rely on those who are, and I've decided to include them in my portfolio. So it's not just something I'm telling others to do. It's something that I'm doing myself. I think from a legislative standpoint, biotech is looking at seeing some reforms that are going to help it the transhumanist party of which I'm part of has been making noise to have the FDA, which approves food and drugs in the United States, loosen their grip on this very precautionary approach, the please don't blame me approach, if anything goes wrong, for approving new drugs. And we've recently had an Alzheimer's drug from a company called Biogen that was approved. There's a couple of reasons this is important to today's discussion. It was the first Alzheimer's drug the FDA has approved in nearly 20 years. The time process under the current process is so long that to bring these to where they can improve the quality of human life doesn't improve the quality of human life during this long trial process. Now, we want to keep these things safe, but the second reason that the Biogen approval is interesting to me is, as I look for the exact words here, the drug was approved on a different basis than what you would see in drugs that had been approved for anything else that had gone through decades of testing before they were out there. Perhaps, I'm an optimist, perhaps this is the FDA starting to look at if the drug doesn't cause harm and may cause some good, giving some kind of limited approval to be able to move forward so that people that are waiting for this drug don't continue to suffer. I don't know if that's what that means. I know there are other people on this panel that can speak to this, and I'm really interested to hear what they have to say. But FDA reform is important. So I found the quote. It was based on the benefit to patients as being most likely a benefit. Those words coming from the FDA were just amazing to me when I read the news story. Now, one last thing. How do I, if I was youth in Malaysia or anywhere else in the world, get involved in this? Well, there's the usual approaches. I mean, you can look to go to school, to get an education, chemistry, biochem, something along those lines. That's great. Or maybe take the business track and use it to help the people that have the technical skills develop and bring to market these products. That's another way that you could do it. But if you really want to roll up your hands and get dirty learning a little bit about biotech, I've found a fun way to do that. The Transhumanist Party Enlightenment Salon that we had this last Sunday had a guest that is a principal in a company that is bringing to market within the next 18 months to 2 years something called a molecular gaming console. Think of it as a video game, not on a computer, but actually in a box where you can do molecular transmissions. They're using something called nanopool technology. That's probably less important than the fact that you can learn while actually learning to play a game. They've given the gaming console a real edgy name. It's called the Demon Pore 64 because they use nanopore technology. And the game is built on the premise of something called Maxwell's Demon. It's a thought experiment by a famous physicist. So they've taken an edgy name and they've created these edgy games that you can play while you're learning hands-on. So some of them are called Raindrop Planet, Molecules of Mars. One of the best pieces of news that I can come out of this is they're making this game console available for less than $100 US. So that puts this in the range of a lot of people to be able to actually do this on their own and expand their knowledge. And the knowledge that comes from this is also shared back with the biotech, bio research community. So I'll make a plug for the USTP Enlightenment Salon, which you can see on YouTube, and I can provide the link to that if you want. It's a 2-hour-long discussion. It's fascinating, and it's something that you can do today. But it wouldn't be fair to talk about today without talking about tomorrow a little bit. I always like to look at the futurist, so we've talked about tomorrow from a standpoint of what it can mean career-wise and what it can mean economic-wise. But going back to human terms, within a few years, what does biotech mean? Where is it going? So one of the exciting areas that I see is in an area called personalized medicine. Every human is slightly different from every other human. When you go and you take a medication these days, it's built for this average human. It's done in a huge test where all the humans are tested the same, no matter what their background is. Being able to focus on personalized says that my genome looks in a particular way. I have certain sensitivities and I have certain things that I can possibly tolerate better. Prescribed medicine to me based specifically on David Shoemaker, not based on the average human. I think that will be an exciting benefit to humanity. Another one that maybe is even more exciting is something called orphan diseases. In the past, it's not been economically feasible to spend the time and the money for development, research, and testing to develop drugs for diseases that not many people have. That's why they're called orphan diseases. So if you take a look at what we can do personalizing to the individual, we can personalize also to the diseases with this technology. This is another great benefit that will come out of the biotech sector. So lots to talk about today. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Edward, how do you want to analyze? I know that you
I'm
have a lot
about
of
to leave for
research.
Dallas.
Okay. So Professor David Smith, you want to add some point? Sorry, Professor Edward. Yes, Professor David.
No, I was
I
done.
will second Dave.
Yes.
Oh, the other David, I see.
Oh, David Smith. Yes, Professor David Smith. You want to add some point?
I would love to add a couple points. The
Okay.
age of bio is a very interesting age because as we talk about bio, most of the time we think about the processes around healthcare, the individualized services, and things like that. But the age of bio also means that we're going to see biological processes in many of the other areas. Back in 1993, I did a forecast for a government agency on biological computing. And biological computing is beginning to come of age now. We're beginning to see bio devices begin to use in other areas, such as in some of product development and actually into products that have biological material and biological processes as part of them. So when I think about the whole biotech, the biological industry, the age of bio, I go much further beyond that. In fact, one of the things that if you begin to look back in my background, and if you go to the last issue of Business Week of the last century, I was one of 7 futurists they asked to say what the century we're in now would be. And my take is this 100 years is going to be about the age of bio. And you know, we're 21 years into it now. And as I look at where we are, and not only the advances in healthcare and many of the other areas of clinical drug development and like that across the entire scene, we're tracking pretty well to make this the century of bio. So when I look at it, it is a lot more than just the processes that we've heard about so far today.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Thank you. We have two David. One is Professor David Schumacher and another is Professor David Smith. We really like all of your conversations, how you're contributing. I'm sure even today I getting a very good response from 100 different researchers from Asia Pacific. They actually create a join. They want to join World Talent Economy Forum and they want to see you in our offline summit. I said definitely when situation will be good, we will arrange conference in Malaysia or Singapore, and we can invite all of the speakers in our forum. So I'm sure our young communities are very excited, and we have our another energetic and very like important scholars, Professor Edward. He has very good policy and interesting analysis on biotechnology. Professor Edward.
Yeah. Well, yeah, David has done an excellent job. David Schumacher and David Smith both on summarizing the state of play and where we're going. But I'll add a few things if I could. I think of this as in a much broader context. That is, it's the age of understanding human biology so that we can live longer, we can live healthier, and there are various methods to do that. This is one of them. Traditional medicine is another, where you mix two chemicals together and they don't have biological materials in them. But we're also seeing many other ways of doing this. And again, in the long run, what we're talking about, by the way, is ending aging. And I know David Schumacher is very familiar with this book, and with Aubrey de Grey, and anyone in the Asia Pacific area that's listening to this broadcast, and you really want to put this all in the most important context, it really is in ending aging. Because when we talk about the sort of biomedical treatments that we're talking about on this show, ultimately what they're doing is targeting ailments most often associated with aging, Alzheimer's being one of them, being the most important perhaps today in terms of research. So we're talking about ending aging and ending all of the associated ailments that harm us. Another very good book, by the way, David Sinclair on lifespan. I have some issues with a few of his things about the philosopher Malthus, but apart from that, it's a very good book as well. But I want to put this again in a little bit of a broader context also with biohacking. And that is to say, using basically editing genetic material. The reason why that's important is, for example, in April of 2018, there was an incredible breakthrough. That is, a laboratory, I believe in Paris, working with a laboratory in Berkeley, were able to sequence the enzyme telomerase. Why is that important? Because your chromosomes have these little things called telomeres on their end. Every time a chromosome or every time a cell reproduces, the telomeres get a little bit shorter. When the telomeres disappear, that's what we call senescence, aging at a genetic level. The enzyme telomerase keeps the chromosomes or keeps the telomeres growing. So we now have sequenced an enzyme that researchers can start to use or start to try to utilize to literally create treatments to end aging. Another one that just came out literally in the last month was a breakthrough using the CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing tool to basically turn off or on how genetic material expresses itself. And why is that important? Because the particular research they were doing was to turn off the production of what's called tau proteins in the neurons in your brain. The clumping of tau proteins is what causes Alzheimer's. There is associated with Alzheimer's. So scientists literally are experimenting with a tool that can turn off Alzheimer's. That's the sort of thing that we're looking at in the future. With all of these incredible breakthroughs, we have a problem, though, and this is something that, again, policymakers have to focus on. We talked about the Food and Drug Administration in this country. Each country has its own approval process because we want to make sure that treatments, medications, and so forth are safe and effective. The problem is that the bureaucracies kind of build up and become very, very slow and stagnant. There was a study done by Tufts University in Boston in 2016, I believe it was, that found that it takes 10 to 12 years at a cost of $3 billion American to bring a new product from research laboratory to patient in the United States. because there are a lot of failures along the way. You try one approach, it doesn't work. Well, you have to tweak your materials and try another approach. These regulations, this regulatory agency was set up in 1962. Now it's been amended and they've had tweaks to it over the years, but the point is it still takes that long to bring a new product to market, because in so many cases, the particular tests that they require are really not appropriate for a lot of the new treatments. A lot of times, for example, you can simply do a test, as it were, on a computer. And that will give you as much information as doing clinical trials, or something that, or perhaps information that will supplement a clinical trial, which is what the normal way they use to do this sort of work. Or, for example, I had somebody I was connected with about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe actually more, 3 years ago, who had invested in a treatment for Alzheimer's in Israel. And it was kind of a magnetic treatment to align the cells in the brain. And he flew his wife over there who had Alzheimer's, and they did the treatment, and it was very effective, very effective. He tried to get the Food and Drug Administration in this country to approve that that equipment for use in this country. And the Food and Drug Administration refused to do it. In fact, I was supposed to have a meeting with this gentleman, and right after he had his meeting with the Food and Drug Administration, he called off the meeting. He said, "I'm so disgusted because my wife is suffering from Alzheimer's, and if I want her to survive, I've got to fly her to Israel because of the regulations in this country." So what we need really is major changes in the way governments regulate pharmaceuticals and all these kinds of treatments. And by the way, the good news, at least in this country, is there's a piece of legislation just introduced called the Promising Pathways Act. And what it does, it's similar to the Free to Choose Medicine Act, where it does create this parallel track. That's how we got medications to 12,000 AIDS sufferers in 1992, 3, and 4. We created a parallel track where something that was safe and they were still testing for efficacy, patients could choose to try this new treatment. And in so many cases, remember, the longer the delays are, the more people suffer and die. The estimates are that when beta blockers, which were used for heart treatments, were available in England but not available in the United States, something like 100,000 people died who might have been saved if beta blockers had been available here, even though they were available in England. 25,000 people probably died waiting for interleukin-2, which is another treatment. This was back in the 80s and the 90s. So it's absolutely important, literally for your life, to reform, to make major reforms and major disruptions in the way that these treatments are tested and approved, because literally our lives and health depend on it.
Thank you. Mr. Jamsit, what do you want to add for today's discussion?
Thank you, Sharif, for inviting me to this wonderful discussion. I think this is key. And you have great experts. I've already heard things that I've learned a great deal already, which is typical for being on your shows. On this subject, I was fascinated by the Demon Poor 64 that you could learn while playing. Because, you know, I know this ancient game called chess. That's the same thing. You learn life lessons, like sitting still and thinking, by postponing immediate gratification. And you teach the kids this game and they think they're at recess. They think they're playing, but they're actually learning life skills. So this is a tried and true method for teaching while people are playing. And this is a great and well-established process. So I love the idea that it's being done at the molecular level. You know, some of the things that we're dealing with, we have two things that we have to be concerned about what we're facing and trying to go in this direction. And one is you know, the messenger RNA vaccines. There was a lot of skepticism. People wanted the Johnson & Johnson vaccine because that was more tried and true, and this messenger RNA, I didn't want to be a guinea pig kind of thinking. But we introduced vaccines for polio, People don't worry about polio anymore. Smallpox. People don't worry about smallpox anymore. You know, we're seeing an outbreak of measles now because we had pretty much eliminated it. But now people are afraid of getting vaccinations. So we have this fear. And, you know, there's ethical issues involved with biotechnology, and there's legitimate concerns, you know, but we cannot be paralyzed by fear. So this is something that we are going to run up against and we're going to have to deal with. We cannot let fear stop us. These are the things that the future holds. These are the solutions that the future will hold to the problems that we currently have and the problems yet to come. So we must be open to change. We must be open to these advances in science and in human health, and all the ethical issues. I think reasonable people can disagree, but you know, you can make progress. And you know, my uncle had to go to Germany for a heart surgery that wasn't available in the United States. So yeah, we've got some issues from country to country, technology-wise, and and everybody's trying to be ethical. Everybody's trying to do it right. Well, these are the growing pains of a brand new world that we're just evolving slowly into, and the pace of change is accelerating. So we're going faster than we ever went before. So we're getting novel problems, novel viruses. And, you know, you could think about it, maybe COVID isn't the virus. Maybe Mother Nature thinks we're the virus and COVID is its autoimmune system response to it. And, you know, maybe we should stop treating the planet so poorly. Maybe we should stop being something that makes the planet sick. So these are all questions that we have to, reasonable people can disagree on what we do about them. But the Alzheimer's, you know, I was so happy to read about this, the advancement in the treatment for this. And, you know, because I think it has tremendous potential and will be figured out at some point. But you know what, how expensive it is to administer now? It's incredibly expensive. Now, the unregulated free market capitalists will tell you, well, you have to spend money to do research and development. So you have to charge these prices to make it worthwhile. Well, this is where the governments of the world can come together and incent these people to do the research and development to produce these health and life-changing materials, these solutions to what are, you know, Alzheimer's is, if you witnessed it, you know, it's heart-wrenching to witness. So if there's somebody that can prevent that heart-wrenching, life-changing experience for those that suffer from it and those that love the people that are suffering from it, you know, by all means, let's support that. Let's support that with a policy. Let's support that with international cooperation. Oh my goodness, what if we all work together? Because we're all in this together. Why don't we all work together to solve these problems? And give the proper incentives to the people to do research and development. And maybe it means that we all have to work together to incent them and not just rely on this economic system or that economic system to solve magically the problems. There's no invisible hand out there solving these problems. These are people with their minds working on these, but they do have to be incented somehow. Because, you know, people have to live, they have to eat, they have to have roofs over their heads, shelter from the storms. So these are things that we have to figure out as we go along. And I optimistically believe that we will. But there will be pains, growing pains going through this process. And, you know, we're just we're just figuring out our gut flora. You know, we figured out probiotics, and then we realized, hey, these guys have to eat something, prebiotics. And, you know, we're just kind of figuring out how much the gut flora affects our entire well-being as people. So, you know, we're just scratching the surface in so many levels, but we're making advances. And we should be optimistic. And we should be thinking of this as that we're all in this together, because we are. The climate change is proving this to us. You know, we have got to work together to solve these problems. And maybe you're not one of these people that is a scientist. Well, you know what? There's biotech companies out there that need accountants too. They need lawyers too. So why not get with the good guys, the people that are trying to solve the problems, because they need support too, whatever you're good at, and hook up with those companies, invest in those companies. If you're into the stock market, invest in green companies, invest in biotech companies, invest in plant-based food companies. These are little things that, if I do it myself, it doesn't matter. But if a million me's do it, it starts to matter. So we're all in this together, and start with yourself first. You'll influence others. Everyone in your sphere of influence will be influenced, and anyone in their sphere of influence will be influenced. And you keep making change. Be open. Do not be given to fear. And, we'll get there. These problems are unbelievable magnitude. They're so complex. But you know what? We can solve them if we pull together. Thanks, Sri.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Professor Donald, I'm coming to you. Before that, I want to give chance to Mr. Aaron. I think he has mobile phone issues or internet problems. So, yes, he want to give some small speech. Okay, Mr. Aaron.
Well, it's always such an honor to come on here with such brilliant speakers. Really, they've done an incredible job of giving the overview of it. But Sharif, what if I told you that we've been using biotech for at least 50,000 years? This includes domestication. This includes fermenting, food preservation, agriculture. That's biotechnology. And more recently, there have been incredible advances in leaps and bounds in like microbial engineering, enzymatic engineering. We really do stand on the precipice of being able to solve all of life's problems using life itself. For the longest time, I think we all thought these would be mechanical solutions. If you want to live a long time, you're going to have a mechanical body. And through advances in biotechnology, more and more, you get to maintain your humanity. Which, what good is technology without humanity? What good is having all these advances if you lose your ability to touch and to feel? Who would care to live even forever if you could never experience feeling again? So again, just a really brief kind of a broad overview on it. I'm not nearly as well educated as these fine gentlemen here, but that's just kind of the how it affects the individual level. And of course, as the medical field adopts more and more of this technology, as new legislation allows for that, we're going to see an overall increase in quality of life. What if you could just make your knees regenerate themselves? What if, you could heal broken bones in a matter of hours, minutes, or days? The possibilities here are infinite as they apply to the individual. Get excited about this stuff. Learn about it, especially the young folks out there. You can do it. You can make real changes in these fields using, your mind, and whether that's actually being the genetic engineers working on this, or whether, again, that's being, lawyers, accountants, support these initiatives with your career, invest your life in something that actually matters. And there's not much out there that truly matters more than, bio advances in biotechnology. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Professor Donald.
Had to unmute myself there. It's fun that everybody's talking or almost everyone has talked about the opportunities that aren't directly doing the biotechnology itself. It goes back to what I keep saying is talk to everyone, because there's jobs out there you don't even know the name of them. You don't even know they exist. I remember I was on an airplane once and I was sitting down next to this guy. I get to talking to him and I go, well, what do you do? He says, well, our company makes the machines in in dry cleaners. So you go into a dry cleaner and you hook and it goes, and I thought, well, yeah, somebody has to do that. But it never really occurred to me that could be somebody's profession. And the reason I say that is because I have a friend from Rotary who makes a killing being a biotech salesman. I met quite a few people in Palo Alto that work for biotech companies in the sales and marketing part of it, which is huge. I want to just say that within biotech, you can think of it in kind of different aspects. And I'm just going to throw out two, though. There's many, many, many more, and they'll probably come up during the discussion. One of them is bioengineering, and the other is bioinformatics. We've talked about bioengineering, which is using things like CRISPR and so on to actually get into the living organisms itself and alter the DNA of the living organisms. I would argue that that the new mRNA vaccines are bioengineering, because they basically engineered these strands of messenger RNA that manage to create proteins that the immune system recognized and attacked, and so anyway, it's also, we talked about nanotechnology recently. And so this kind of bioengineering of genes and of other material at the cellular level is a form of nanotechnology, because what we're doing is we're using little biological machines to alter the cell itself. I also want to echo what David was saying, which is that we have the another DNA is being able to be starting to be used for computing. So we have DNA computers. So that's another interesting place where biotech and mechanical kind of blur. They're not, the distinction between something that's mechanical and something that's biological starts to not be a clear boundary. One of the things that I like here, and I haven't heard this clearly enough from anyone that I'm satisfied, is this whole idea that the processes that we use to be able to test drugs is too cumbersome. And the reason for that is that if there's really only one way to determine using statistical methods if something is effective or not. Right now you hear people, they say, well, my grandmother took this and she got better, or somebody flew to Europe and they got better. I know a guy two people who died going to Mexico for these cancer cures that were supposedly going to save them. And we have absolutely no way of knowing by small samples like that, or individual anecdotal evidence. We don't. There's a couple of books that have come out recently about the placebo effect. And the truth of the matter is if you take a pill, your body will actually respond. So for instance, the person one book I wrote, she says she keeps some blue pills and red pills that are nothing in her medicine cabinet. And when she has a headache, she found the blue pills work better for headaches and the red pills work better for upset stomach or something like that. But she just has these pills and it works. I mean, you can actually see in the body that the body is creating endorphins. You can measure it. You can measure biological changes that take place simply because of the idea that that it might work, could work. I'm going to be interested to see what happens in this Alzheimer's drug, because the studies actually showed it didn't work, basically. So it's interesting. There's a lot of pressure to get these out. So that'll be interesting. But that's another side note. But where I'm going with this is that what a double-blind study is that you basically take two groups of people that are matched as well as you possibly can for the same distribution of age and race and so on like that. And you take these two groups, and then what you do is you give, well, you don't actually know the two groups. You take a big group of people and they wind up being two groups by virtue of what you do, which is you give them half of them placebos and half of them the actual drug. And the reason it's blind is because the people who are giving the drugs don't know which is which, and the people who are taking the drugs don't know which is which. And the reason for that is that some of these psychological effects can take place. So if the person gets the medicine and the person giving it to them knows which medicine it is, there might be subtle psychological clues that the person is giving to the other person that causes them to do to generate more or less of the whatever it is that's going to be able to help them get better. So in order to do that, there has to be a fairly large group of people for that to work on. And when you get into a drug like the COVID drug, you wind up in this situation where not everybody gets COVID, and you don't know who's going to get COVID necessarily right in the first. So you can't test the drug unless somebody is exposed to the disease. I mean, every COVID drug in the world is going to work perfectly if you don't encounter COVID. You'll never get COVID because you don't encounter it. So what you have to do is you have to have a large enough group of people so that you'll be able to get enough people who get COVID in these groups to be able to make some sort of a prediction or an analysis of whether the drug is working or not. And that's a huge and expensive thing to do. And I don't see any other way to do that yet. There's talk of using bioinformatics, which is another part of another distinction that I wanted to make. Bioinformatics is basically science or part of computing where what we do is create models of various kinds of life and interactions, chemical interactions. So that game that we're talking about is sort of a mini bioinformatics. And it has done a marvelous job of eliminating possibility things. In other words, we say, well, this couldn't work. We know this couldn't work and this couldn't work, and we can test, billions of things to find out things that don't work. And then we can find things that we hope will work. And then we can try that. And for the first mRNA vaccine was, catch this, it was made in San Diego in 3 hours. That's how quick people can do this stuff now. But how do you know that those programs that you're using to test the medicine or whatever it is, whatever you're trying to do, how do you know if those actually work? How do you know if the programs work? And so the answer is you have to be able to somehow have enough, compare how the programs work to other things on enough people for a long enough time that we are comfortable that they actually do work. I mean, there have been drugs, even recently, many drugs get rejected because of side effects that were not expected. The famous case is thalidomide. That really caused the kind of a tightening up. So anyway, I'll end it there. But
Thank you, Professor Uddin. How do you want to analyze to this topic, biotechnology?
Hello. Sorry for the lateness. It's midnight here in Australia, Adelaide, Australia. Sorry, I was a bit late. Yes, sorry, I didn't hear all of the previous talks, but I just heard now about the vaccines and the this incredible advancement. I think this topic, again, like many of these discussions, if we did this in 2019, probably have a totally different focus. But now in 2020, 21, basically, I think 90% of our focus is on coronavirus. And it's true, when I grew up, we used to learn about plagues and, things that happened a long time ago in Europe and whatever, and London. There was the famous pump, which if you're ever in London, you should visit it. I can't remember the details, but it was a famous pump where they discovered where the disease was coming from, this single pump. So that, but when we were growing up, these were all historic things. We'd learn about these plagues and things that happened a long time ago, and we never thought it would happen in the modern world, especially in, let's say, developed countries or middle developed countries at least. So I think now it was a shock to the system that we thought we are so advanced as a society, and yet a tiny virus can destroy the world, and it's still going on. Last year in 2020, I was talking to friends and colleagues and my students, and I think almost everyone thought it would be over before the year is out. By end of 2020, it'd be all over. We never imagined it would be worse even in 2021. Like if you think of January, it was one of the worst months in USA, and now it's just terrible in many countries. India, Malaysia, unfortunately, very terrible, the coronavirus. So so I think we in a way, humanity as a whole, we've been let's say we've realized we're not as smart as we think. Even a tiny coronavirus can knock the whole world out. So I think biotechnologists and health technologists are again focusing on the basics, like communicable diseases like coronavirus. I don't think COVID-19 will be the last. I think there'll be a 20, maybe 24 or 26. I don't think it's gonna. I think that that these things are going to become more and more common, simply because we've become so globalized. I'm right now in Adelaide, Australia. It used to take 2 months by ship to come from London, and now it's 12 hours, right? So the world has just become globalized. So anywhere where some virus escapes is going to go all around the world. I agree with the previous speaker. This mRNA technology is quite incredible. I don't know much about it, but as I'm an electrical engineer, but from the little I know, and it's quite incredible technology that you can, as it was just said, within hours make a prototype of a vaccine, because you are essentially programming the DNA of some cells. So I think my conclusion is that if we had this discussion in 2019, we'd be talking about all those difficult diseases that still have not been solved. But again, because of 2020, the shock of 2020, we realized as a humanity we've still got to focus on the basics. There's communicable disease like coronavirus, and it was plainly shown that a tiny virus can shock the world, destroy the world. So again, congratulations to those bioengineers or scientists that made the vaccine so fast. I mean, they literally saved millions of lives, and I'm sure next year's Nobel Prize will go to a few of those scientists that made the vaccine. Surely they're going to get the Nobel Prize. They deserve it. So I think that's my conclusion.
Thank
As
you.
a whole, we focus on communicable diseases now much more.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor David Smith, are you with us? I saw that he is in car. Then, sir, can you hear me? Professor David Smith, can
I
you
can.
unmute, please?
I can.
Yes,
I
basically,
am.
Professor Uddin bring very important points about vaccine, and the most important thing is that how we can make these things more safe and secure. And this is actually common questions to everyone, even Professor Donalds and many people, many of the speaker actually bring this point: is biotechnology safe? Because we are creating awareness with the much people. So. What is your advice to the people, how it will be helpful for them?
Well, the one of the real exciting things about this century is that we've gone and dramatically changed our pharmaceutical processes and how they work together. And we're beginning to see the beginning of customized drugs and customized medicine. And the advances of understanding biotechnology is what the driver is for both of those. The ability, like we said earlier, to see that CRISPR is beginning to be used as part of our healthcare regime. The fact that I can go in and in less than a year genetically analyze a virus, a disease state, and begin to produce unique solutions to it are opening a whole new era of what we're going to see. And as someone mentioned earlier, we're right on the cusp of regenerative healthcare, where we can regrow organs, where we can begin to do things that repair bones that were broken with the regenerative process. One of the most exciting breakthroughs of the last couple of months has been we can now regenerate our whole optical system, and retinas can now be regenerated in the lab today. And as someone who's a couple of retina surgeries, I know that one is personally very exciting to me. But as far as a consumer, as a politician, we have to update our thinking around the whole process. I remember being involved in some of the first polio vaccination rollouts in the United States, where we had to take the sugar cube as part of that process. And then we went in and later got a shot for it going forward. Those were small steps compared to what we can do today. And from a regulatory political view, we have to begin to adapt our processes. As was said earlier by one of the other speakers, most of our processes for approving drugs have not been updated in decades. And if I look globally, even further back than that. So those are some of my comments of how we need to adjust. Consumer already, though, has adjusted in many ways. It's interesting because part of my work is in healthcare. And when you go in and talk to doctors, particularly the registered nurses and physician assistants, a vast majority of patients have already Googled and searched for their symptoms. They've searched for what some of the solutions are already before they go into the doctor. So that has changed even how we view our role in the healthcare system as well, is the access to this tremendous amount of information. So those are kind of my thoughts.
Thank you. Professor David Schumacher, what's your thoughts in terms of safety and security? Because much people want to know more. They have a specific question, but I want some of your explanation.
Yes, something I'm happy to talk about too, because I want to point out that Aaron was exactly right when he said that biotech is not something new. That's the reason I changed the background up here behind me. What you see is sort of a continuum of what's gone on with corn.
Mhm.
On the far, this direction is what ancient corn looked like as people would glean for it in the fields. And on this side, we see something that looks a bit more like modern corn. But the idea of the continuum is this is a process that occurred over time, trial and error, improving the human condition. Now, this is just corn, but we've done this with many, many other foods. And we've done this now as we're moving into the age of being able to modernize, 21st centuryize, if I can create a new word, drugs and treatments and so forth. So it's not new. That's part of safety. We've, as humans, have always pushed the envelope to make things better. We should not stop doing that. But in today's 24-hour news cycle, with people needing to say something and to have something to write about and to draw audiences, it's much easier and probably much better for growing your audience if you can talk about the negative aspects of something than if you can talk about the positive aspects of something. It goes back to we humans, through the evolutionary process, attribute much more weight to something negative, something that could hurt me, than something that's beneficial. You know, give somebody a compliment and they'll say thank you and they'll remember it for a little while. But say something negative to somebody and they're going to remember that for years. That's part of this process. So when we're talking about the safety of biotech, of bioengineering, yes, valid concerns. And we need to, on one hand, be cautious. On the other hand, we need to take action, and those need to be balanced. And we need to remember what I said about negatives and positives. So intuitively, when people balance, they balance with a heavy weight on the negative side without even thinking about it, built into us as humans. We have to work to be able to level this playing field. So precaution, very important, but proaction, it won't happen until there is action, and those need to be balanced. And this is why I brought up that article about the Biogen drug for Alzheimer's from the standpoint that it doesn't do harm. It may do some good. It's the first drug for Alzheimer's that I'm aware of that treats the underlying condition and just not the symptoms. This is definitely a step in the right direction. But be prepared. You're going to read a lot more of the negative in the news than you are in the positive. So take control of what information comes to you, balance that playing field, and make decisions based on that. Thanks, Sharif.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Edward, another important thing is the regulations of biotechnology industry, in the biotechnology industry regulation. So how we can prepare, even this is very important because as our many audience from Asia Pacific and developing nations, so I think the governments has to know, even we are heavily promote these things to our governments. So what is your advice for regulations in biotechnology?
Yeah, I mean, this is really crucial because, by the way, I'll dovetail with the discussion of Alzheimer's because as some of you have listened to these broadcasts before. My mother is 89 years old. She suffers from Alzheimer's. It's getting pretty bad right now. I got to see her a couple of days ago, and she still loves to see the kids. That's really great. But so this is very personal to me, and I'm sure everyone listening has probably known someone who has Alzheimer's. In one sense, there's the good news is that people are living to such an age that Alzheimer's makes a difference because most people don't get Alzheimer's until they're old. So now we have an aging population. The good news is that they're aging. They're not dying when they're 40 or 45 or 50. So that's the good news. But the problem is the challenge is this, and you brought up regulations. And again, this is something I've worked on literally since the 1990s. Government bureaucracies are just not terribly good and flexible at changing with technology. The Food and Drug Administration in this country is an example of that. And again, I'm not suggesting that the people who work there are bad people or the people who work at the equivalent organizations in Japan, which I know a little bit about, or Britain or some of the other countries. It's the setup that is part of the problem that innovative companies find it very difficult to get through the regulatory process. But here's something very interesting. Even with our Food and Drug Administration, if your regulators in Malaysia and Singapore and some of these places are listening, we actually see where the process could be better, even given what they're doing. For example, our Food and Drug Administration in this country, the way it works is you have, they require first safety tests, okay, for bioproducts as well as traditional medicines, as well as medical devices. And those safety tests usually take not that long a period, maybe a year or so. Then there's so-called efficacy tests. That's what usually takes 3, 4, 5 years, where you do double-blind tests with very, very, very limited groups. And you say, well, let's do this with women who are between 30 and 40 and have never had diabetes, but who do have this and that. And then you do that little test, and then you do another test, and so forth. And that takes up a lot of time. But, for example, our Food and Drug Administration right now has a process for it's called the adverse events recording system, where they track drugs after they've been approved, because they're always trying to update labels. Okay, so they're always getting real world data, so that they update the labels and say, well, now that this drug's approved, it's been out there for a few years, we know a little bit more about it, because you have real world data coming in. They've just set up a medical device information consortium. This is a public-private consortium that basically tracks and monitors patients who are using approved medical devices to see what the effects are after they've been approved. And it allows researchers to make those medical devices more efficient. If you take a look at the literature, what you find is an emphasis on the importance of real-world data. And so I would point to what the Japanese did a few years ago. They created a parallel track, very similar to the AIDS parallel track that was created in this country in 1992, where a product that has been certified as safe, but they're still testing to see exactly how efficacious is it. Is it 75% efficacious for men between 30 and 60 who don't have diabetes, et cetera, et cetera? They can put a product on that track, and then patients have the option of trying it, or they can wait till they can use some product that's already approved. The importance of that approach is that, and this is the way we want to try to do it in the United States, because what Japan is doing is very limited, is that the patient experience with the product that's accessed while it's still in these tests is going to be put in the database, a secure database, so your personal information is protected. So researchers can look at the real world data coming in. Here's the example. Where are you going to learn more about a tiger? Are you going to learn more about a tiger in a zoo, in a cage, where you look at it and maybe you feed it a little bit of this and you feed it a little bit of that and you do this and that? Or are you going to learn about the tiger in the wild? Obviously, it's the tiger in the wild. So to the extent that you open up access to experimental treatments, then you're getting real world data flowing in, so that researchers can have access to it, and patients and their doctors can have access to it. And someone might say, well, you know, Ed, here's one that I'm going to only show this to you for a brief second, because anyone who has epilepsy, like my wife does, could be disturbed by this. There is an experiment, I don't know if you can see this here, where 40 hertz, megahertz of sort of flashing lights have been experimented with to see whether it has any kind of effect on the brain. And it does seem to have an effect. And so this is now it's not only in people doing clinical trials with this, but I can literally do this trial right here myself. So the point is to open up the system so that we get real world data flowing in. And again, and again, I won't go into all the details of the medical literature, but this is really the wave of the future. And what we need is regulators to appreciate this. Yes, I don't want myself, my children, my parents taking bad medication. No one does. Okay. But the thing is, the system right now just cannot keep up with the current technology, with the current breakthroughs, with personalized medicine. And that's where, if I'm talking to a regulator in Malaysia, government official in Singapore or Philippines or any of these other countries, I would say, let's have a sit down and talk about what's in the future and what you can do to make your system more efficient so that you can be part of a global system so that we can come up with these treatments and cures in the future. By the way, just one other quick thing. I wrote a piece that was published. I put the link in there just before Joe Biden became a candidate, a year before he became candidate for president. I wrote a piece because he has a very important research organization because his son died of cancer, as many of you know. And I wrote a piece because it happened to be the 10th anniversary of my brother dying from cancer. And I wrote this piece, and it says, it was like, dear, at that time he was a private citizen, Biden, I absolutely agree with your goal, but you have to understand that throwing money at the problem is not the issue. You have to create a regulatory regime that encourages laboratories and entrepreneurs to do for the biotech sector what entrepreneurs have done for the communications and information and computer sector.
Thank you for your excellent analysis. Mr. James, if you want to add some point on regulations. Yes.
Yes, I do. And I've been fascinated by what I've been listening to. And I've been making notes. And I want to go back to the idea of balance. And I think that we can look at it at a macro level and a micro level. And you start with yourself. And don't let praise go to your head. And don't let criticism go to your heart. And this is what we can do for ourselves and for others. And, so what we hear, the information sources we're exposed to aren't trying to inform us so much as they are trying to persuade us all too often. So it's actually a difficult problem to solve, to get good information. But, if you put your mind to it, you can do it. The other thing that I wanted to respond to is the rate of change that we're talking about. It's mind numbing to contemplate. Because usually a grandparent and a grandchild would have pretty much the same experience throughout human history. But that's not the case anymore. A grandchild wouldn't go to the grandparent and ask their advice for what's the best TikTok going on right now, because their experiences are very different. And this is true in the medical field, and this is true in our regulatory bodies. We have old systems in place that are hard to change. And the change going around them is accelerating. The pace of the change going around them is accelerating, yet moving them, even budging them a little forward or a little to the side, that takes time. So we're not keeping pace from a regulatory system, from a regulatory perspective, with the pace of change that we're facing, the reality that we're facing. So we're living in the past in terms of regulations. Now, how do we change that? Well, we can spend another show on that. But recognizing it is the first thing. Become aware that the regulatory processes are lagging and our chances of changing them are small. But it doesn't mean we stop, because we don't give up, we persevere. We keep trying. We keep trying to get these other these people from Malaysia, people from Singapore, people from whatever countries, that together to put their heads together and solve these problems and then sell it to the people that are hard to budge. And if it's just a couple, 2, 3, won't happen. But if you get more and more people, because the top-down approach works for some things, the ground-up approach works for others. And sometimes it takes both, top-down, people pushing from the top down, and a lot of people pushing from the ground up to make real change happen. And that's what we need. So if you think this is too big a problem for you to solve, don't give into that despair. Keep trying, keep pushing, because if you can help others get informed, stay current, even though it's very difficult to know what's right, then you can make this groundswell of necessary change. You can affect society, you can change society. I grew up in a time where the young believed that we could affect change, and we did. Did it stay changed? No. So this is something that every young generation has to take on. They've got to be part of the solution, and they've got to have confidence that they can make a change, because you can, if there's enough of you, and you can make change in these old, stuffy, hard to change in regulatory environments, because they are laggards. They are not going to be addressing taking the steps that need to be taken unless they're pushed, and pushed hard, and pushed consistently. And this is what we need to do to change the regulatory environment to keep pace with what's the reality of the pace of change that we're experiencing on a global basis, on a country basis, on a state basis, on a local community basis. These are things that have to change faster than they've ever changed before. Because these technologies, when we're talking about biotechnology, they're not waiting around for congressional approval, because that's not going to happen. They're going to be developed. And then how do we get them to the people that need it? So we may need some new solutions to old problems that are now facing us in different ways than we've ever experienced before. Novel is not a scary word. New is not something to be afraid of. So we just have to adapt to our current environment, because it is the survival of the fittest. And that's not the strongest. That's the one that fits best, the most adaptable, the one that can change to what's really their current environment. So we will survive if we become fit. We fit into our current environment. And those that fit best will survive. So be nimble, be quick to change, quick to adapt to your surrounding circumstances, because they are changing faster than they ever have changed before. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you. Thank you. We will discuss more on regulations with Professor Donald and Professor Adrian. I want to give chance to Professor David Smith because I think he want to leave early. So what's your concluding remarks for today?
Thank you very much. And I love the comments that were just finished about the regulatory environment. Back about a decade ago, I was fortunate to ask one of the speakers at National Cancer Institute meeting of how to bring innovation into cancer research to alleviate the pain and suffering of cancer by 2025. And I had just finished designing in QTEL for the Central Intelligence Agency as a way to bring innovation into that environment. And part of what we talked about at that multi-day session is how to bring innovation, and particularly through public-private partnerships, which we've talked about before, as one of the tools and necessary focuses, resources, and capabilities together. We also talked at that meeting at great length about how the traditional large organization, cancer research organizations, were just not moving fast enough. How much of their money was spent for overhead and not enough for the actual research. And so the whole concept of entrepreneurship, of innovation from small organizations, small entrepreneurs, combined with the large organizations who can scale. One of the challenges we're facing globally today is that we have a lot of entrepreneurs who are kind of brilliant solutions, but they can't scale to deliver those solutions in a timely manner. And so this is one of the things, as we looked at the systems and the systems in cancer research, that came very clear, is that we have to look at places where we combine the regulatory environment, the entrepreneur environment, the academic environment, and the large company environment to be able to address the issues. If I take that now and go broader across the whole area of biotech and biotechnology is we are now combining things well outside of the fields of the past. Just during the course of this, on my phone, I've seen 3 tweets that say how the Internet of Things and the Internet of Everything it will impact biotechnology and impact healthcare, impact the pharmaceutical industries, impact the point of care delivery for patients, impact the point of care delivery for patients at home opposed to having to be in a hospital. And so those are a lot of the elements I think we need to understand as we look at this. The whole biotechnology area is a great example how everything in it is a system of systems. And we need to treat that as a system of systems instead of solution as opposed to something that is in this one subset of biotechnology and not look across all of biotechnology and outside biotechnology to how we can pull solutions to bear to rapidly move this forward. The National Cancer Institute conference I was to eliminate suffering by 2025, we're on track to make great progress on that in many of the different types of cancers. Same token, what we're seeing in that type of things, and with the advances in biotechnology, we're also on track to begin to make a major dent in mental health, where there's genetic elements of it, with bio elements of it, and well. So we're really at the start of a new renaissance that we're going to be seeing in biotechnology and healthcare.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, sir.
for having me on.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for joining today. Professor Donald.
Unmute, Donna.
My cursor keeps going away because the mouse shuts off. I'm going to talk about 2 things. And the first is not about regulation, but the second is about regulation. We've been missing the biotechnology that extends life. One of the most important biotechnologies that extends life and will continue to extend life is crops and the food that we eat. Right now, with global warming, the ability to grow crops that have been grown in certain areas is declining and kind of moving north. So they're going to be growing grapes in Alaska. Alaska will be a great wine growing company. But if you go to the Monsanto website, Monsanto is a company that people just love to hate. And they talk about the genetic modifications that they're doing to be able to make the crops be grown at lower latitudes or in the harsher conditions with less water, with too much water. I mean, all over the world, we're seeing these changes. And some people say, well, big deal, we'll evolve and, the plants will evolve and things will work that better. But corn, as Edward said, corn is completely genetically modified. Originally, there was an accidental genetic modification of 2 grains that allowed the Indo-Europeans to be able to thrive and expand as they developed agriculture back about 10,000 BC. And so there's a huge pushback. So when I go to the store, I see these things, no GMOs, no GMOs. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Everything is a genetically modified organism. The meat you eat, the food, every single solitary thing. And people kind of looked into it, they have this thing, BT corn, and I forget what BT stands for because they're very long Latin words. But what they did is they found another plant that had a protection against a certain type of caterpillar. And what it does is it only affects these type of caterpillars because you have to have the exact right chemistry inside your stomach for it to be able to be for it to be fatal. And only these type of caterpillars are the only creature in the world that we know of, but certainly not people. I mean, it doesn't have, it's just a protein. You digest it the same way you digest any other protein. It's absolutely harmless to people. And so it's done a lot for food in places like India and things like in India and other places. BT corn has been, BT crops have been incredibly valuable and important. So that, interestingly enough, since the plant itself protects itself against caterpillars, they don't have to spray toxic chemicals on it. So it actually makes the food more organic, not less organic. And so the whole brouhaha against GMOs, I think, is really pretty silly. And what I'm saying leads into something else. One of the criticisms that people have of GMO crops to some degree is actually just myths that don't have anything to do with anything. For instance, the idea that Monsanto invented a seed that couldn't, and then the plant could not create seeds that could be used, terminal seeds. And that's not true. It's just simply not true. And there's a lot. Another one was about how if the pollen of your genetically modified organisms got in other crops, then they could sue you for stealing their patented pollen. And that's not really true either. There was a farmer in Canada who deliberately, on purpose, went and transferred the pollen and tried to clone these genetically modified crops. And he was successful at it, and he did it. But it was an accident. He was doing it on purpose. And the trial went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, and every single solitary jury and judge that looked at that all said he was stealing it on purpose, which goes to what I'm to the thing about regulation. And one of the most stringent regulations on all of this is patent law. And what that does is if somebody creates something like, for instance, a COVID vaccine, then we have international agreements that other countries can't produce that COVID vaccine unless they pay money to the original owners of the COVID vaccine or the original creators of the COVID vaccine, which is reasonable in one sense because it allows the original company to recoup their expenses for building it and making it. And so, and it takes years to do it because it costs billions to get a drug out, partially because so many of the things that they try don't work. Biden has done some things to lift some of the patent regulations on the COVID drugs because many of the drugs we take are manufactured in India. India has a fantastic pharmaceutical industry that can produce drugs, and people take them all over the world, and they're perfectly good drugs. But they can't produce the COVID vaccine because of patent regulations. How that could play out is hard to know. I like what Thomas Jefferson said. If I light your candle with my candle, there's more light, and I've lost nothing. He was against patent law, but that doesn't really make sense because we have to be able to do it. But that's, I think, one of the regulations that makes us it just makes things hard and sticky. So it's worth thinking about that and noticing that when you see it. And
Thank
that's
you.
all.
Thank you, Professor Adrian. We are discussing on regulations and this point.
Well, yeah, well, we saw with the coronavirus how they fast tracked. All the vaccines got fast tracked. I think none of them have actually been formally FDA approved yet. I think Pfizer is getting there, but we saw what can happen when you deregulate. The vaccines, and they really fast tracked them, and it saved probably millions of lives, maybe hundreds of thousands and millions of lives. But there, of course, a lot of people are hesitant because of the fast tracking. They think it's maybe unsafe. So I guess in the future we have to strike a balance between deregulation and fast tracking of drugs, medicines, vaccines. But I think in times of a crisis like a pandemic, like we had, then probably fast track is the way to go. If you're going to save millions of lives at the risk of maybe low risk, hopefully very low risk, then I guess during a pandemic the calculations change. In engineering terms, we're in a kind of step function now, like a transient, and steady state is different. But I think we have learned from this pandemic that deregulation can work in saving many lives.
Thank you. Thank you. This is actually excellent session. I'm sure that our audience really enjoy the sessions, and I request all of our audience share our content as much as possible, because we are strongly working for the development of the humanity. And that's why our topic, we just finishing our 298 episode, and every episode we are trying to bring different knowledge, different things, different strategy, different informations, and which will be very, very helpful for the countries of Asia and around the world. They can utilize our content. And our major focus, we want to arrange another discussion tomorrow. This is our major focus, that we want to bring university, industry and government together. We are strongly working on it, how we can collaborate in between university, industry and government. So tomorrow we have very special session on that particular topics, how we can like make a proper relations in between, because this is the huge gap from our practical experience. Even we have our expert panelists, they can give their opinion on that particular points. Every country, they have a huge gap in between these three important ingredients. We are trying to team up in between governments, university and industry, and hopefully if we can fix this problem, many of the problem in this ecosystem we can solve. We are strongly working with different countries, governments. Regularly we sharing our content with different developing nations, important ministries. We are sharing our content in between different corporations, university. Hopefully by these collaborations and sharing knowledge, we can solve many problems from our local point of views. And beside that, World Talent Economy Forum, we are moving with our fundraising options because we have to grow. There are many students. Let's say today I get 100 of students. They are saying that they have a lot of problem in research. We have to train them. We have to guide them. Our mentor definitely will support them. We need all of our mentor support, but definitely for arranging this kind of things, we need more financing, more support. So I request the corporation, those who are observing our show, the government, those who want to support our initiative, or example, any of the individual organization or individual person, they want to donate World Talent Economy Forum, they can donate directly our PayPal account, our account president, World Talent WT Forum at gmail.com. And beside that, we are very open to solve many problem. Already we are getting different kind of energy related problem, healthcare related problem, education related problem. Our panelists especially, they are the most valuable for us. If they want to contribute our projects, they can join in our team. They can give us advice as a consultant or as an advisor. They can support our different projects. We are trying to develop in university projects, different interesting things we are trying to develop in developing nations. Hopefully it will really solve. We do not do only the discussions. We are doing a lot of projects, practical work, so which will help us to enhance our capacity and capabilities. So any points, our speakers, those who are our mentors, they can guide us. They can give us the strategy or policy. So we are open for that. And thank you everyone, and especially the audience, those who support us from around the world. Please share our content. So I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. I want to start from Professor David Schumacher, then Professor Edward, then Mr. James Eid, then Professor Donald, and finally our brilliant Professor Adrian. So Professor David Schumacher.
Yes, thank you, Sharif. There's been a lot today that we've shared. We've talked about what biotech is. We've talked about the effects of government regulation on biotech. There's different takeaways for different people here. What I want to encourage is whatever resonates with you out there in the audience, especially the Asian Pacific youth, use your influence. Focus on influence, because that's how change will come. That change has to come at the government level, it needs to come at the companies and corporate level, and it also needs to come at the individual level, because the cost of not changing, not keeping up, is just too high. The cost of not having the whole world develop and developing countries collaborating is just too high. I think that COVID, which we end up talking about on one of these shows, can actually have a silver lining in this. I'm hoping that people will see that you just can't cure COVID in one country and sit back and say, we're done. This has to be done throughout the world. We need that collaboration. We need that in people's minds. Hopefully, the rapid development of COVID drugs will help people understand that technology is not moving at an 18th or a 19th or an even 20th century rate, but the 21st century rate. And we need to be agile and adaptable and changeable at all of these different levels. So I encourage people to influence, because everybody has a part to play in this. Thanks.
Thank you. Professor Edward.
Yeah, I'll just end with three quick points here. The first point is that we really are at a point in human history where living to 200 and being healthy is not science fiction anymore. Biotech is one way. Biohacking is another way. We talked about nanotechnology. I just finished writing a piece yesterday about nanotechnology, nanomachines that, for example, can generate oxygen in your blood better than your lungs can do it. I could go over all of these kind of things. It's such an exciting time. Part of the problem, however, is that we have regulatory systems that were set up 50 or 60 years ago that are well-meaning, but which really aren't really block the kind of innovative approaches that we need. I was at the Food and Drug Administration headquarters, which is near me here in Maryland, on the last day of February in 2020. And I was having a meeting, and I said, I've gotten reports that your regulations are getting in the way of laboratories putting out test kits for this thing called COVID, which looks like it might be a very serious problem. And of course, we all know it was a very serious problem. I was literally at the Food and Drug Administration headquarters complaining about what might happen if they don't loosen up on some of these regulations. Well, the second important point is, I think what we need is patient choice. So that we can get real world data flowing in for products that are safe but still are experimental. We're trying to do that in this country. Japan has done it for one particular set of treatments. We're looking to do it in this country where patients can take informed choices. And that's why the proactionary as opposed to the cautionary principle is so important, because the longer you delay, if it takes 10 to 12 years and $3 billion to get a new product to patient, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people suffer and die. So we really, regulators and the governments in the Asian Pacific area want to protect their people. So do I, but we have to take a serious look at our current systems to make them 21st century systems so that they will encourage and allow the small laboratories especially to come up with these innovative tools.
Thank you. Mr. James.
Find it?
Thank you, Sharif. Wonderful show, as I have come to expect. I say, there are walls between us, and we don't need to build any more walls. If you keep your stuff behind a wall, people will come and get it. There will be conflict. It's guaranteed. So tear down the walls. And if you think it's too big a problem for you, you're just another brick in the wall. Be an agent of change. You can do it. I assure you. I introduce myself as James Eade, agent of change. I'm 007 because I cause trouble, but it's good trouble. Sometimes you have to cause trouble because people are going to want to stay comfortable. They like to be comfortable in their past, in what has existed in the past. Sometimes it's an imaginary past that never really existed, but they think it did, and they want to stay where they are. And it takes people of change, agents of change, to make them change, to get out of their comfort zones. And if you're out of your comfort zone, by definition, you're not comfortable. So some of these changes we're advocating aren't going to be comfortable changes. But guess what? Get used to it. Because if you're going to adapt, if you're going to survive, that implies change. Things are not going to be the way they are. Regulatory systems have to adapt and change. Governments have to adapt and change. People have to adapt and change. And you know what? Nature's boundaries are mountain ranges, oceans, rivers that are hard to cross. The lines on the maps and atlases are artificial. They're the ones that man has made. We're all in this together. It doesn't matter what country you're from. It doesn't matter what language you speak. We're all in this together. I'm sorry, I can't show you, my arms are together. And, because we're in this together, we have to act like it. We have to start accepting that the rate of change is phenomenal now. It's accelerating. It's going to continue to accelerate. So we can't sit back in comfort any longer. And none of us have all the skill sets necessary. We have to think of this world as a team. And if we're the virus, we think of COVID as the virus, but what if we're poisoning the host? Smart viruses allow the host to survive. If you kill the host, the virus ends up dying too. So stop poisoning the planet. That's one thing you can do. And there's a lot of good in the world. We concentrate on the evils, the negative. You look at the news, you look at the newspapers, it's all negative. It's all stuff that makes you feel, well, throw your hands up, give in to despair. No, don't give in to despair. Persevere. Be an agent of change. You can do it. Whatever your skill set is, your skill set will help. It can help. If you want to be a lawyer, attach the legal system that to doing good in the world, and stop suing each other. Litigation is part of the problem. The only people that are making money out of this suing each other's stuff are the lawyers. Stop it. Stop suing each other. Stop getting in the way of regulations and or people who are trying to cure diseases. Oh, the cure you gave me caused me illness. I'm going to sue you. And so demotivating people from helping you. So stop it. Stop doing harm. Do good. Thank you, Sharif. It's a wonderful show.
Thank you, Professor Donald. What's your concluding remarks today?
Well, I will say I'm not quite sure that James's last example. He said, "Well, the medicine made me sick, so therefore." I don't want you to cure me. I mean, it seems like if it made you sick, it's not curing you. But one thing that I want to point out when we didn't really talk too much about, I'm just kidding, James. You know I love you. biotechnology goes a lot farther than what we're talking about right now. We've been talking about humans and life extension and medicine and regulation, which I'll mention one other thing about. But right now, one of the things that's cool they're doing here in Silicon Valley is there's companies that are growing meat. And what they did is they took the muscle tissue from beef and other animals, and they put it into a laboratory environment so that the cells could multiply, and they wound up with it's meat. It's exactly the same as you could eat if you killed a cow. So we're able to start doing things like that, which is incredible. You realize that many of the drugs that you take, including COVID vaccines, are part of the process of manufacturing them is to have bacteria, insert things into bacteria so that the bacteria manufacture either the drug or the components of the drug. They have bacteria that basically manufacture insulin, and that's how we get our insulin these days. So, and it's the same thing. We have cells in our body that create insulin. They took the cells and they gave them life in test tubes, and then the cells just produce the insulin and we harvested it. So biotechnology is like a huge area that, and as I was saying, you extend life a lot if you have enough to eat. I mean, starving to death is one of it just doesn't work for life extension. So food is very, very critical to us, and we have first world problems here, as we like to say, but most of the world is developing, and focusing on those kinds of things is incredibly useful and important. I met a woman who had stage 4 lung cancer, which is absolutely fatal. There is no possibility that you're going to live if you have stage 4 lung cancer. And she had a certain gene that when they gave her some medicine, it expressed the gene and it cured her. Totally cured her. The tumors went away. She was absolutely fine. So we are getting piece by piece, but cancer isn't one thing. Cancer is basically if the genes mess up and they start expressing proteins that they shouldn't be, we have different genes in different parts of our body, and we have and different places on the gene can be affected and cause the cancer. So it's kind of a slog. One thing that Edward didn't mention is that after phase 2 trials, there's phase 3 trials. And phase 3 trials are, now that we know the drug is effective, or we believe the drug is effective, then we are going to test it on large populations. And we did do phase 3 trials for COVID. There was like groups of 30,000 people or so. But that's, and in essence, getting the drugs out before they're super well tested is basically doing phase 3 trials on everybody. I know that there are many people in my wife's healthcare facility that won't get the COVID vaccine. And the reason is because they don't want to be experimented on. So if people believe they're part of a phase 3 trial of a drug that hasn't actually been vetted, then people are scared. They won't take it. And that gets to be from GMOs to new vaccines and all these different kinds of things that we can blame the regulatory agencies, and they're definitely need reform, but they're part of a larger society, and the testing and so on gives comfort to the people so that they're going to be able to take it. And this anti-vaccine stuff is just a nightmare for the world. I mean, these people it's just terrible. What can we do? How do we reassure them and make sure that we can actually start eating GMOs and taking vaccines and doing the kinds of things that we need to do. Society is this interlinked group of social networks, and the FDA is maybe a symptom as much as a cause. So the things that James always says about being open and being flexible, if you are getting all your information from certain sources and a limited amount of sources, then you don't have any way of cross-checking things. So the most beauty of the internet is go out and Google whatever you're interested in. Go out and Google criticisms of whatever it is, and find out what people are saying against what it is that you believe in. It may be it may be when you look at it, you'll be able to think it through and go, well, those arguments are ridiculous. They're just logical fallacies. On the other hand, you might go, wait a minute, there's some really good information here that I didn't know that is going to help me modify my beliefs. And that goes to what I was just saying, is that we regulate things by our own fears and our own the social structure, the networks that we're in, where we all start believing the same thing and start forming inertia. Organizations in general are created to prevent change. So you can't expect them to change, because if an organization's successful, what they want to do is move till the people are all just cogs in a machine. And if one of them goes, you can just replace the cog in the machine. But if the cogs are all different sizes and going all kinds of different speeds and things like that, the machine won't run. So that's affecting change inside of organizations is hard, partially because of the structure of the organizations themselves, and because they're embedded in a larger society that wants them to do certain things. So you can become aware of it. I am. I mean, I can see it. I can totally see it, because I've gotten to understand networks and how social networks work. But you know, on a personal basis, if you're a young person, remember that biotechnology is this vast area that's not just about drugs or extending human life directly and things like that. So, there.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Adrian, what's your concluding remarks?
Yeah, it was a fascinating topic. Went from food, from food to medicines, and it was a great eye-opening topic. So I think I'll leave us with. I'm not sure it was talked about earlier, but politics is also an issue. America's basically, out of the pandemic, almost. I think even New York is saying by July they're going to open up almost everything. So when New York opens, basically it's the pandemic's over, I think, in USA. But we didn't mention politics. That that's in US. The people with more right-wing views tend to be more anti-vaccine, which is kind of ironical because Trump actually boasts that he was the person who got the vaccines out. It's a bit ironic. Anyway, but left-wing people tended to want to get the vaccine, and we saw the same thing with the masks. And myself and my daughter, we thought August it's a pandemic's almost over, so let's go to America. So we went to Los Angeles, and little did we know. But the funny thing is, we went to 3 states: California, Nevada, and Arizona. We visited things like the Grand Canyon and such, but it was quite amazing. You saw the extremes. Like when I met one of my friends, he's quite old man, but he's a famous. Yes, there we go, Donald. He's a famous computer scientist, and he lives in Menlo Park, Silicon Valley area, San Francisco. Over there, yes, yes, James, you're right. So over there, everyone's wearing the mask, including me, of course. But then we go to some places in Las Vegas was most people wear masks, but we were in a place called Lake Havasu in the border of California and Arizona, I think. And boy, oh boy, boy, it was just like a different planet. I mean, you'd get stared at if you wear a mask, and this is like in December, like the height of the pandemic in USA. So we went so the mask was a political issue, and then now the vaccine is a political issue. So one thing which we have to think about is, everyone here is, I think, basically scientists, but somehow politics can change people's opinion. You can have the greatest vaccine in the world or the greatest medicine in the world, and and then I've met people who are very, very lovely people, but they're quite right wing, and they believe all of these let's say conspiracy theories. And so you can have the best medicine, best vaccine in the world, and they won't take it. So maybe we have to think how can scientists help overcome this political divide? And maybe this divide is only in America. I'm not sure, but I'm in Australia, and I'm seeing the same thing. People who are a little bit, let's say, right wing, they're anti-vaxxers, all right, and they're the same people that are saying, oh, you don't need masks. So yeah, maybe it's a Western thing, Western thing, because I didn't notice that when in Malaysia when I was living there. But anyway, that's another thing. How can we as scientists, get through to the political divide? Because there's a lot of people that hate us as scientists simply because we are scientists, and they think we're liberal. I don't know what. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's true. Even I have to personally fight with many people, and I naturally has to say you have to listen carefully about the modern science and technology from the scientist, the scholars, from the scientist. They have different person. They only think, oh, scientists just talk. I say no, they are also innovate. They are also produce. Even today, I have to go for a big debate with some of the corporate people, and I say no. Scientists has a lot of innovation, and that is the fact. That is the ultimately the objective of actually World Talent Economy Forum. We have to introduce the right scientists, the right people to the society.
Yes, but may I say, Sharif, even here we're in a bubble, right? We're all everyone here is agreeing, and I'm sure everyone who watches this show is agreeing. So this is a problem. Even in social media, we're all in these bubbles, and I'm sure there's another show on I don't know, Fox or whatever, which is saying exactly the opposite of what we're saying. So how do we as scientists overcome this political divide? I don't know. I don't have the answer. Maybe it's a good topic for another show, Sharif.
Yes, no, definitely. That's why that is World Talent Economy Forum objective. The politicians, the university, and the industry. We have to bring everyone together. Then we can be more effective. Because every day I'm also learning from you. I'm also growing myself, and our audience also developing their knowledge and everything. And these are the three factors very important. So we need our honorable speakers to that session, and I can assure you, confirm you, we will reach 100 different countries. At least we reach 20 different prime minister office regularly. We personally, even prime minister advisor, prime minister of the different country, we regularly, even now they are following us. They are trying to solve their problem. So hopefully we need to do more hard work. That's why we are looking for some investment. If we can do that, I'm sure with the help of our speakers, because alone I cannot do anything. But if we have a big team, like scientists like Professor Adrian, Professor Donald, Mr. James Ed, David Schumacher, even the Transhumanist Party, they have many scientists as well. If we work together, then we can create a more strength. And beside that, the different countries, education minister, ICT minister, we are regularly inviting them, even finance ministry, energy ministry. Hopefully they will join. This month we have our another conference on the healthcare policy, 28 June to 2 July, because of lot of response from different people. They want to join in our conference. So hopefully it will be more effective. And I need, please, all of our speakers support as well. All of you are very influential. You have your own community. If we support our initiative, so we as a team, we can grow. And definitely, if you have any of the solution for our community, we are open. We do not have to pay anything. We are open. You can share your research paper, your article, your innovations with our community. So thank you, Professor David Schumacher, Mr. James Ed, Professor Donalds, Professor Adrian. Always you bring some energetic thoughts and everything. It's really, really helpful for us. Actually, all of your thought is very helpful for World Talent Economy Forum. Every day we are learning. Every day we are growing. That is the way we have to develop a knowledge-based society. We have to develop a knowledge-based society. I am from a developing nations. I changed my life only based on knowledge. I changed my life only. What country I visit many countries. I go to directly university. I do not go for shopping malls or cinema halls. I directly run behind university. I learned from Oxford. I learned from London School of Economics. I learned from University of Malaya. I learned from Singapore National University. I learned from MIT. Everywhere what country I visit, first I go to university. So I believe if we can team up in between government, universities, as well as industry, we can make a more strong ecosystem. And we need more scholar people like Professor Adrian, Professor Donald, Professor David Schumacher, James Ed. Please, our audience, share our content. Share our content. It's 100% free. 100% free. You do not have to pay any single penny for this World Talent Economy Forum content. Just need your time, and I'm sure your time will be very valuable. Many guardian complain me that we do not have good content in social media. Now you can share your good content with your like children, with your as a parents, you can share this is good content. So I request everyone, and I request all of our speaker, need your support, need your team and collaborations and partnership. By this way we can solve many problems. Thank you, Professor David Schumacher, James Ed, Professor Donald, and Professor Adrian, for your excellent session. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye and take care.